Can the brand new Rlaarlo X12S dethrone the Typhon Grom as the king of small bashers? Stick around, we're gonna find out. And then later, you know we're gonna be upgrading it. As you can see, the X12S is significantly larger than the Typhon Grom, and this Grom's even got bigger wheels on it than stock. Its wheelbase is actually nearly identical to the Mini Maxx, which could make for an interesting comparison later in the video. And whereas this buggy's on a similar platform to the previously released ROG1, Rlaarlo's not afraid to update things, so let's find out what's new in here. As you can see, we've got a longer chassis here, and the layout inside is completely different. To take a closer look, let's get these wheels and tires off here. I'm really excited to see how this thing handles in stock form, but of course I'm more excited to get some bigger tires on this thing and see what it'll do as a monster buggy. When Rlaarlo released the rally car, I was really surprised to see how many changes they had made under the hood, as it shares the same platform as the Omni Terminator, but it was pretty different. I'm definitely curious to see what they've changed here as well. Taking a look at these tires, the tread looks like a fairly generic buggy tread. These wheels are also a pretty standard looking turbine style wheel. They're on 12mm hexes. They do have foams in them and they feel pretty decent. Those are going to be running on plastic hexes in the front and in the rear. And these hexes are mounted on standard cross pins, which means upgrading them to something bigger shouldn't be a problem. These cross pins are a little bit longer than I would expect them to be, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you can see that we have shielded bearings back here. I would have loved to have seen sealed bearings, but shielded bearings are okay and are pretty common on something this small. Behind those, we have the same plastic hubs we saw on the ROG1, and it looks like we're running the same dog bones in the rear and CVDs in the front. There were some issues with braking CVDs under high load on the ROG1. It probably won't be as big of an issue on these small tires, but we might run into problems on the bigger tires. We'll just have to find out. This is coming with a 2845 3600 kV motor and a nice matching ESC with a fan on it. One thing that's new is a mount for the battery connector. This is a standard XT60 connector, but it's mounted to the chassis now. I'm assuming that they did this for body clearance. There's always limited body clearance underneath these buggy bodies, and that could also limit upgrade potential for this ESC. Powering, that's the same 2200 milliamp hour 3S battery that we saw in the ROG1. They're rating this battery at 35C, but let's put it on the LiPo dyno and find out what it can really do. As you can see here, we're getting a true 21C. This is on a brand new battery, so that will probably go up a little bit. And honestly, for a small battery like this, that's really not that bad. And that supports the fact that I've never had any problems with these batteries. They seem to have plenty of power. This ESC is mounted on a new center brace system, and it looks like we're gonna have to take that off in order to take a look at the receiver and the servo. It's nice that this all kind of comes off as one module, and just removing these three motor connections allows us to mostly get it out of the way. The center brace the ESC is mounted on is brand new. It's a hybrid aluminum plastic piece, and the ESC is double-side taped to it. I've had mixed results with their double-side tape. We'll have to see how this one holds up. As you can see under there, we have a steel center drive shaft, and that's attached to a slipper clutch, which already puts this ahead of some of the competition. This receiver box is brand new for the buggy. It houses a 6-channel receiver, and it is definitely not waterproof. Interestingly, this receiver is just floating around in here. That's normally not a problem, but most manufacturers do double-side tape them down. Moving up to the servo, we can see they have a different servo horn on here. The ROG1 uses a white plastic one, and this is a black plastic one. I'm not sure if that's better or not. I never had a problem with the one on the ROG1. Removing that servo mount gives us the first disadvantage of this car, and that's the use of 1.5mm bit screws. There are a lot of them on this chassis, and they're quite a bit easier to strip out than 2mm bit screws. Under here, it looks like we have an aluminum geared servo. Let's pop this open and see if there's any waterproofing in here. As with a lot of servos, this just comes apart with 4 Phillips screws, and I don't see any O-ring on this screw. So whereas this is probably going to be pretty water resistant, I doubt it's going to actually be waterproof. Between this and the receiver box, you probably don't want to submerge this car. Obviously, there are ways to improve waterproofing. You can conformally coat the board in the receiver, and you can seal up the servo, but it would be nice to see these waterproof from the factory. Of course, Traxxas doesn't really like you waterproofing your receiver boxes, so we may not see that. Underneath here, we have a standard looking driver board and a brushed servo motor. Removing the top, it looks like we have almost all aluminum gears in here. The first gear is plastic. That's actually fairly common. Each successive gear in the gear train has more load on it, so making this first gear out of plastic probably won't be an issue. Of course, again, we'll find out when we bash it. It's pretty unusual to see aluminum gears in a servo, but Rlaarlo really seems to like them. I haven't really had any trouble with them, but the departure from the standard plastic, brass, steel options is an interesting choice. Speaking of interesting choices, let me get these electronics back together and let's see what kind of choices they made in the differentials. Removing the pinion gear cover shows us we have a steel pinion gear here, and we can just start to see that slipper clutch too. This gear is on an infinitely adjustable sliding mount. A lot of manufacturers these days are going to mounts with holes in them instead of slots. I prefer the slots because it lets you get your mesh perfect, but many people might not care. Now we can pull the spur gear cover off, and we see we have a dual pad slipper clutch here. I would love to have seen a center differential or even a center differential option, but given that some other manufacturers don't give us anything, a slipper clutch is nice. Obviously this wing mount is new, and interestingly they're using self-tappers for it. I don't think we're going to see a self-tapper anywhere else in this car. I wonder why they put them here. Let me know down in the comments if you have any thoughts on that. This wing mount looks fairly well reinforced and should be reasonably durable. These shocks look just like the ones on the ROG1. They are aluminum, threaded bodied, have hybrid aluminum plastic shock caps, plastic lowers, and feel reasonably good. They do have a little bit of air in them, but we're gonna run these just as they come because I wanna see how this thing works out of the box. I really like these little shock towers. They're nicely machined, and as you can see, they are 70/75, which is a fantastic upgrade to get right out of the box. Another little oddity here, we have Phillips screws for the sway bar. It's not really a problem, but it's also something you wouldn't see from some other manufacturers. This car has what I would call a pretty classic build style, and whereas it's not terribly hard to work on, it's not quite as easy as some of the other options out there, and it might be nice to see it updated in a future version. That being said, these differentials look pretty nice. We do have sintered steel gears here, and it feels like they might be fluid filled, but there's only one way to find out. All right, popping this open, we can see, yes, this is a fluid-filled differential. It is sealed. It does have all steel sintered gears inside. That means this thing's easily tunable and probably not something you're gonna have to upgrade. One thing to note is that the fit between the gear and the differential case is a little bit tighter than it needs to be, making getting these screws lined up difficult when you put it back together. Not a big deal, but just something to keep in mind before you take it apart. And before we put that back together, let's take a look at these dog bones. As you can see, they're thickened in the middle, but a little bit thinner on the ends, and these are fairly small. And people have broken these, as well as the front CVDs, under heavy acceleration on the ROG1. Not sure if it'll happen here. We're just gonna have to find out. It is worth noting that Rlaarlo offers S2 tool steel upgrades for those CVDs and dog bones, as well as a bunch of other upgrade parts, which I've found to be really high quality. It's nice to see manufacturers doing this because a lot of times the aftermarket does not come along and support with upgrades, and some of us just love to upgrade. To go along with all this, you're gonna get a charger, some tools, a speed gear, which we're not gonna be using because we're gonna be putting bigger tires on it, and that'll do basically the same thing, a bunch of stickers, and a pretty basic transmitter, though it does give you throttle percentage. One thing to note is out of the box, the throttle percentage is probably gonna be put at 75%, so unless you're new, just go ahead and crank that right on up. And now that we've got that turned up, I'm gonna put all this together because I can't wait to see how this thing performs. One interesting omission is that you can't actually put the servo horn on with the servo in the car, so let's just fix that real quick. There we go, now we can get the screw in from the side. I'm gonna finish putting this together. Let's go see how fast it is. Feels pretty stable. Here we go. Full throttle. Not bad. One more pass. Full throttle. Yeah, she feels good. All right, let's see what we got. All right, 37 miles an hour. That's not bad out of the box, but now it's time to see how she's gonna bash. And to test it, we're gonna be using this awesome new crawler tracks ramp. If you didn't see me build this in the last video, first of all, it might be time to turn on post notifications, but second, this thing's really cool. As you can see here, it comes flat packed like a piece of IKEA furniture, and putting it together is a fantastic little project. It takes about 30 minutes. Once you get everything unpacked, it's just a matter of following the available instruction video, taking it one step at a time, and then just putting this thing together like an erector set. Everything fits together really well. It's kind of a unique process, and I had a ton of fun building mine. I think you, and especially you and a kid, would really have a lot of fun putting one of these together yourself. This is a great thing to put under the Christmas tree, and guess what? I'm giving a brand new one of these away. Make sure you stay tuned to find out how to enter to win one. But for now, let's go bash. Guys, so far I really like this thing. Through some admittedly fairly light bashing, I didn't have any real problems with it. The brake does come on pretty strong when you're coming off of a jump, and unfortunately I don't think there's any way to adjust that. I was able to change my driving style a little bit, and that definitely helped, but it is something to be aware of. Overall though, it handled really well. I think it's a little bit more versatile terrain-wise than the Typhon Grom is because it has bigger tires, but I want to see what it does with some really big tires. Now keep in mind, these trenchers are larger than the tires even on the ROG1, so if something breaks in the drivetrain, it's almost certainly going to be the tire's fault, and therefore my fault, but I really want to see how it handles these bigger tires, so we're going to try it anyway. These trenchers are some of my favorite small car tires, and not only should they increase traction and ground clearance, but they're going to change the overall effective gear ratio, and that might actually make this thing faster than the 39 miles an hour we got before. I think this thing looks absolutely awesome on these tires. Let's go see how fast it is. Okay, now that we got the bigger tires on, I'm curious to see how much faster it is, or hey, maybe slower. Let's find out. It still feels very stable. Can we get full throttle? Full throttle. Oh yeah, she's faster. Let's give her one more pass. Very stable. Let's see what we got. 48 miles an hour, that's 10 miles an hour faster. She's really liking these bigger tires. Let's see if she likes them off the big ramp. But before we smash it up off the big ramp, I've got some S2 tool steel shock standoffs to put on. Let's go ahead and get these upgraded. The stock upper standoffs are just bolts, and the upgraded ones are these really nice looking standoffs. I never really had any problems with the stock standoffs, but these are a cool looking upgrade. And we're also gonna install these shock protector caps. All right, there we go, that looks great. I'm gonna do the other side, and I'll see you outside. All right, guys, well, we found this car's weak point, but before I show you how you can fix that, let me tell you how you can win that ramp. All you need to do is make sure you're subscribed to the channel, then put any comment down in the comments section, but make sure you include the digit 1 anywhere in the comment. Doesn't matter what the comment is, just has to have the digit 1 in it for you to win that ramp. Now, let's take a look at that weak point. That weak point is this rear wing. I took a really bad hit on this rear wing on the big ramp, and it pulled these screws out of the shock tower. I went ahead and put longer screws in here. As you can see, these are stainless. They ended up pulling out again on a really bad hit. Fortunately, this is a pretty easy thing to solve. You can see on the other side, there's room for nuts back here. So I'd recommend if you're gonna be doing big air with this, just get some longer screws and put nuts on this side because this wing and wing mount put a lot of force on this tower. And if you take a really bad crash, you're probably gonna end up pulling those screws out as well. Other than that though, this thing held up incredibly well. Even with these big tires, I had no problems with the CVDs or the dog bones. And at the end there, I was really trying to break something. And overall, I think this is a great car. Should you put the bigger tires on it? I'm not sure. They're a lot bigger than these tires are. And of course, anytime you do that, you're putting a ton of extra stress on everything in the car, and you're going to break things more often. But even with the stock tires, it's a lot of fun. I think it's as much fun as the 223S Typhon Grom. Though it's not all sunshine and roses, this is significantly harder to work on than the Grom platform. It's not terribly difficult, but smaller screws and a lot more of them mean that you're going to spend more time fixing this if you break it. And then of course, parts availability, upgrade availability, long-term availability of those things are always potentially in question with these vehicles, though Rlaarlo is pretty good with those things. Overall, I think this is a fantastic little car, and if you're looking for a Mini, you should definitely look at one of these because it's fun and it's pretty affordable. Now, speaking of giveaways and fun, I've been doing a lot of giveaways lately, including one in this video and this video.